The savanna was a canvas of gold and ochre, painted by the merciless afternoon sun. In the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Tsavo East National Park, a stillness had fallen, a quiet so profound it seemed to swallow the very sound of the wind. It was a deceptive calm, the kind that precedes a storm of a different nature, a storm of the soul. The animals had retreated to the shade, the birds were silent. All but one. He was a scrap of tawny fur and oversized paws, a creature caught between the helplessness of cubhood and the dawning instincts of the lion he might never become. His name, in the silent language of the wild, was Leo, though no human would ever speak it. His world, until that morning, had been defined by the warm, musky scent of his mother, the solid bulk of her flank against which he slept, and the rumbling reassurance of her purr. Now, his world was a nightmare of stillness and a growing, gnawing terror. His mother, Nala, a lioness of formidable grace and quiet strength, heavy with the promise of new life, lay motionless in the cruel embrace of an ancient, twisted baobab tree. The tree was a gnarled giant, its trunk hollowed by centuries, a known refuge for smaller creatures. A desperate chase after a panicked hyrax had led Nala deep into the cavernous interior, but a sudden, hidden shift in the wood, a settling of the great tree's bones, had trapped her. A thick, jagged limb had fallen, pinning her hindquarters with a weight that defied her formidable strength. The more she struggled, the more the splintered wood bit into her flesh, and the more the precious life within her womb stirred in distress. Leo had watched, a whimper caught in his throat, as her powerful movements gradually slowed, as her labored pants grew shallower. For hours, he had tried, nudging her face with his, licking her closed eyelids, emitting tiny, pleading mewls. But her eyes, usually pools of amber fire, were clouded with pain and exhaustion. She could not rise. It was this scene that the dusty, sun-faded Land Rover stumbled upon, its engine a blasphemous roar in the sacred silence. Inside were two people, Dr. Anika Sharma, a wildlife veterinarian with eyes that missed nothing and hands that healed as often as they documented, and Ben, her guide, a man of the land whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles earned under the African sky. They were tracking a reported poacher's trail, a grim duty that weighed on them both. "Stop, Ben," Anika said, her voice a sharp cut in the heavy air. She had seen the small, desperate figure first. Leo, standing sentinel before the baobab's dark maw, his body taut with a fear that radiated from him in waves. Ben cut the engine. A cub. Alone? That's not right. They approached with the slow, non-threatening movements born of a lifetime of respect for the wild. Leo did not run. Instead, he did something that chilled Anika to her core. He took a faltering step towards them, away from the tree, and let out a sound that was not a roar, not a growl, but a raw, keening cry of utter desperation. He looked at them, his green-gold eyes holding Anika's, and then he turned back to the tree, taking a few steps, looking back again. The message was as clear as if he had spoken human words: follow. Help. He's begging, Ben whispered, awe and sorrow twisting his features. The little king is begging us. Cautiously, they neared the baobab. The sight inside the hollow trunk made Anika's breath hitch. Nala, a magnificent lioness, was a prisoner of wood and gravity. Her breathing was shallow, her flank matted with dried blood from the wooden vise. The bulge of her pregnancy was a heartbreaking detail. She's alive, Anika breathed. But barely. And she's full term. The stress. Then, if we don't get her out, we'll lose her and the cubs both. But how? This was not a snare to be cut or a wound to be stitched. This was a logistical nightmare. A sedative was out of the question, her compromised system might not survive it, and they couldn't risk the unborn cubs. Trying to move the log by hand was impossible. They needed machinery, a winch, manpower. The ranger station, Ben said, already turning. It's 2 hours' drive. We'll need the heavy-duty jack, the winch on the truck. And more hands. Anika's mind raced. We can't leave them. The hyenas, they'll have caught the scent of blood by nightfall. And she nodded to Leo, who watched them with an intensity that was soul-piercing. He won't leave her. He'll die defending her. A plan, fragile and desperate, was formed. Ben would race for help. Anika would stay. It was against every protocol, a profound risk. But leaving meant a death sentence. As Ben's rover disappeared in a cloud of dust, Anika felt the immensity of the wild close in around her. She was alone with a dying lioness, a desperate cub, and the encroaching shadows. She settled under a acacia tree, a respectable distance away, her medical kit at the ready. Leo paced between her and the baobab, a tiny, taut bundle of anxiety. Hours crawled by. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. And as the light faded, the shadows came alive. First, it was the laugh. The chilling, hysterical giggle of spotted hyenas. 3 of them emerged from the bush, their eyes glowing in the twilight, drawn by the metallic tang of blood and the scent of vulnerability. Leo's baby fur bristled. He placed himself squarely before the entrance to the hollow, a ridiculously small barrier against the gangly, powerful scavengers. He snarled, a sound that was more air than threat. Anika's heart hammered against her ribs. She stood, waving her arms, shouting, "Get back! Go on!" For a moment, the hyenas hesitated, confused by this human's defiance. But hunger was a stronger master. One bolder individual slunk forward, its jaws dripping. What happened next was pure, unthinking instinct. As the hyena lunged, not at Leo, but past him towards the helpless Nala, Leo launched himself. It was a suicidal move. He landed on the hyena's back, a flea on a wolf, his tiny claws digging in, his needle teeth sinking into a leathery ear. The hyena yelped in surprise and pain, shaking violently. Leo was flung like a ragdoll, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Anika cried out, grabbing a heavy fallen branch. She charged, swinging wildly, driven by a surge of protective fury she didn't know she possessed. Her attack, combined with Leo's shocking bravery, discombobulated the hyenas. They retreated a few yards, snapping and giggling, regrouping for another try. It was at that moment of terrible stalemate that a low, thunderous growl erupted from the baobab. Nala! Though broken and trapped, the sight of her cub in peril had summoned a last reservoir of primal power. The growl was not loud, but it carried the full weight of her authority as an apex predator. The hyenas froze. That was not the sound of dying prey. It was the sound of a queen. The standoff held, stretched taut by the threads of instinct and courage. Anika stood guard, branch in hand. Leo, shaky but defiant, regained his feet and returned to his post, a fresh cut above his eye. The hyenas lurked, just beyond the ring of Anika's headlamp light, waiting for an opening that the combined, unlikely defiance of human, cub, and lioness did not provide. The longest night of Anika's life was pierced by the sound of engines. Twin beams of light cut through the darkness, and Ben's rover returned, followed by the ranger station's heavy truck. 4 rangers, led by a grizzled man named Joseph, piled out, assessed the scene with swift, professional eyes, and unloaded equipment, a heavy-duty hydraulic jack, thick straps, a portable winch. "You are brave, or mad, Doctor," Joseph said, his eyes softening as he saw the bleeding cub and the determined woman. "We didn't have a choice," Anika replied, her voice raw. Now began a delicate, torturous operation. Working with silent efficiency under Joseph's direction, the rangers secured straps around the fallen limb. They placed the jack, positioning it with agonizing care to avoid causing further injury. Anika prepared her kit, painkillers safe for pregnancy, fluids, antiseptics, bandages. Leo watched every move, his trust in Anika now implicit after their shared battle. On 3, Joseph murmured. 1, 2, 3. The grunt of the jack, the screech of protesting wood, and the low groan from Nala were the only sounds. The massive limb lifted, inch by agonizing inch. As soon as there was clearance, Anika was there, sliding on her belly into the hollow. She administered a painkiller and stimulant, her hands steady on the lioness's fur. Nala's eye rolled towards her, a flash of amber in the torchlight. There was no aggression, only a deep, exhausted acknowledgement. "She's free. Gently, pull her out." Hands, gentle despite their strength, gripped Nala's forequarters. They dragged her slowly, smoothly, from the tomb of wood onto the soft savanna grass. Anika immediately began an assessment. Dehydration, shock, severe muscle damage, and a deep, contaminated wound on her hip. But her heart was strong. And then, she felt it, a contraction, hard and firm, beneath her probing hands. "She's in labor," Anika announced. "The trauma has triggered it. We need to get her to the clinic. Now." A makeshift stretcher was fashioned from a tarpon poles. Loading the semi-conscious lioness was a Herculean task, but it was done. Leo, without prompting, leapt into the truck after his mother, curling himself against her side. The convoy sped through the night, back to the sanctuary of the Research and Rescue Clinic at the ranger station. The clinic was a modest but well-equipped facility. They moved Nala to a large recovery enclosure with soft sand and straw. Anika worked tirelessly under the bright surgical lights, cleaning and closing the wound, administering 4 fluids and antibiotics. The labor progressed, but Nala was too weak, too exhausted to push. Her vital signs began to falter. We're losing her, Anika said, her voice cracking. The cubs are in distress. We have to do a C-section. Ben, prepare the anesthesia, carefully. Joseph, I need you to assist. It was a surgery performed under the most intense pressure, to the soundtrack of Leo's anxious whimpers from the adjoining observation room. With Ben monitoring vitals and Joseph assisting, Anika's skilled hands performed the procedure. One by one, she delivered 3 tiny, wet cubs, 2 females and a male. They were limp, not breathing. She cleared their airways, rubbing their small bodies with a warm towel, administering gentle puffs of air. A lifetime passed in a minute. Then, one cub, the larger female, let out a faint squeak. Then another. The male, the smallest, took longer, but finally drew a ragged breath. Life, fragile and fierce, had won. Anika placed the squirming cubs near Nala's head as she began to wake from the anesthesia. The lioness, weak and stitched, nuzzled them, her rough tongue bathing them. A low, rumbling purr started in her chest, a sound of pure, instinctive love. Leo was allowed in. He approached cautiously, sniffing his new siblings, then gently licking his mother's face. The family was together, broken, but alive. The weeks that followed were a testament to resilience. Nala, though she would always carry a slight limp from her damaged hip, recovered her strength under Anika's watchful care. Her maternal instincts were formidable, and she cared for her new brood with devoted tenderness. Leo became a curious, playful big brother, though he never strayed far from his mother's side, the memory of his terror seeming to linger in his eyes. Anika visited them daily in the large, naturalistic rehabilitation enclosure. A bond, silent and profound, had been forged in that life and death night. Leo would often chirp a greeting when he saw her. Nala would watch her with a calm, knowing gaze, allowing her closer than any other human. The day came for their release. They were healthy, strong, and Nala's hunting skills, tested on live prey introduced into the enclosure, were sharp. The rangers loaded them into a transport crate for the journey back to their territory. At the release site, as the crate door swung open, Nala emerged first, surveying the golden plains with regal assurance. Her 3 new cubs tumbled out after her, exploring their true home for the first time. Leo was the last to exit. He stood for a moment, looking back at Anika, who stood by the truck, tears streaming freely down her face. He took a step towards the wilderness, then paused, turning his head to give her one last look. It was not the pleading, desperate look of the cub who had begged for help, but the calm, acknowledging look of a young lion who understood a debt that could never be spoken. Then, with a flick of his beginning to bushy tail, he bounded after his family, disappearing into the tall, welcoming grass. The unthinkable had happened. Not just a rescue, but a crossing of the deepest divide. A human had been trusted in the most sacred space of the wild, a family's fight for survival. And a lion cub had not just begged, but had fought, and in doing so, had reminded them all of the raw, connective tissue of courage that binds all living hearts. The savanna swallowed them, but the story, the silent plea and its thunderous answer, echoed on in the wind, a secret held between the earth, the sky, and those who had been there to witness it.